are on the eve of Kamala Harris picking her vice president. We are 90 something days away from the 2024 presidential election. Mark Kelly of Arizona was a top contender. And then we heard about Andy Bashir of Kentucky was a top contender. And then all of a sudden, like Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, became like a big. I'm like, where did Tim Walz come from? But all of this time, people have been talking about Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, former attorney general of Pennsylvania. But now it feels like it's not going to be Josh Shapiro anymore. That's what it feels like. Who will be the VP's VP? So I have put in the description box down below all of the supplementary materials, the additional reading materials that I have found most useful today in coming to this conversation about who is going to be the vice president. If I had to guess, I think it is going to be Tim Walz, which is really interesting. Really interesting. Why do I think it's going to be Tim Walz? Well, go to the description bar down below. It's late. Let's start with Harris nears her big VP reveal after fierce lobbying from Democrats. That's from the New York Times today. From what I understand, Josh Shapiro, for the whole 2 weeks or whatever, that this Veep stakes, this search for the VP, this public debate has been happening. Like, he has been the front runner. And for obvious reasons. There's also another article from the New York Times titled Inside the Obama Shapiro Relationship. Again, also linked down below. Josh Shapiro has a very close relationship with former President Barack Obama. Kamala Harris also has a fairly close relationship with former President Barack Obama. Like, they're all kind of operating in this same political universe. And that article about the relationship between Shapiro and Obama basically is Josh Shapiro, back when he was a state representative almost 20 years ago, went all in for Barack Obama when nobody else was really for him. If you really go back to 2007, when Barack Obama was a senator, people thought it was Hillary Clinton's turn. Like, there was just an assumption that 2008 was Hillary Clinton and the Congressional Black Caucus was Clinton. And in these primaries and caucuses at the beginning, it was a lot of Clinton. And then occasionally, like, Barack Obama would win something. And then occasionally, like, Howard Dean would win something. Like, it really wasn't cemented that it was going to be Barack Obama until spring. But Shapiro endorsed Barack Obama early, and Barack Obama, being fiercely loyal, has had Shapiro's back since then. Shapiro has climbed his way up in Pennsylvania, become attorney general, become governor, and Barack Obama has been behind him, endorsed him, asks about him. In that article for the New York Times, David Plouffe, Barack Obama's former campaign manager in 08 and 12, and apparently David Plouffe is now working, and this is again the Shapiro world, Harris world overlap. David Plouffe is quoted in that article about Shapiro and Obama's relationship, about how much affection Obama has for Shapiro. And David Plouffe is now working with the Harris campaign. Like, there's just a lot of, on paper, it makes perfect sense that it would be Josh Shapiro, in addition to the fact that it's just generally assumed that whoever wins Pennsylvania is going to win this election. And Josh Shapiro won his governor's race fairly easily, but to be fair, he won the governor's race fairly easily against a legitimately insane person. But he won. And that article about Obama Shapiro underscores that one of the ways that Shapiro won so easily, so handily, is by adopting a similar kind of posture, not literally, I mean, literally and figuratively, like, and electorally, but working hard to win over voters in exurban Pennsylvania and rural Pennsylvania, like, and getting a higher percentage of those voters than what a Democrat would normally get running in Pennsylvania. He has a fairly broad electoral mandate. People like him. He presents well. He speaks well. That's not his best picture. I'll be honest with you. That's not his best picture. But sometimes you see Shapiro and you're like, that's not a bad looking man. Let's watch him, in action.
Really bad impression of Barack Obama. What is your response to that?
Is that what he said? That's great. I love how we get the real-time quotes here. I mean, look, I don't know. Barack Obama was probably our most gifted orator of my time, so it's kind of a weird insult, I guess. But look, I'll say this about J.D. Vance. It is real hard being honest with the American people when you're not being honest with yourself. J.D. Vance is a total phony baloney. He is the most inorganic candidate I think I have ever seen on the national stage. He doesn't know what he believes, and that is why it is impossible for him to articulate a coherent message to the American people, because he doesn't believe it. This guy is not exactly off to a good start, and it is clear that Donald Trump really has buyer's remorse with his pick. So if he wants to sling insults in my direction, which I'm not even sure is an insult, let him do it. That's fine. Bring it on. I'll be ready for whatever the hell J.D. Vance throws my direction. Thanks, everybody.
So that was Shapiro. He presents well. Look, I was looking back on some JFK stuff today because I want to talk about the transition and political campaigns that happened in the mid 20th century when more people, the majority of Americans, started to have televisions in their homes. And you know how people like swoon over JFK? And I'm like, I know, but you get politics goggles, right? Because it's like, but Shapiro has lots and lots of baggage, and he was the front runner for a long time. But the baggage is just too great. I mean, even John Fetterman has come out, or Fetterman aides have been planting stories about issues with Shapiro. He's a brazen careerist. He wrote this crazy pro-Zionist essay when he was in college. Now, that was 30-something years ago, and he basically has come out, had the same kind of moderate position. It's like the typical like two-state solution position that people have. And Tim Walz has that same position, by the way. But like, it was just really clear the way that the momentum was going. Shapiro had the momentum and he lost the momentum. He just had too much baggage. In addition to that, Shapiro is not vice president material. I think the reason why the momentum shifted away from Shapiro so quickly was because he does have some scandal stuff in there with the Republican in his inner circle who was accused of sexual harassment and then paid somebody out and whatever. But also, people don't really care about that. He's just not vice president material, meaning he shines too bright. With all of these conversations about the way that the Biden administration intentionally kept Kamala Harris in the background, that's in the reporting. Ron Klain, the former chief of staff for Joe Biden, has said that they didn't utilize Kamala Harris as much. But one of the reasons why is because Kamala Harris, especially now, she's looking good, right? If you stand her next to Joe Biden, she makes Joe Biden look like he's 102 years old. If you have Shapiro next to Kamala Harris, she looks dull. He just has that he just has that thing. That brazen careerist, I'm going to do whatever I can to get to where I'm trying to go, but I'm going to, be charming and put words together in a compelling way. He just has that thing. And Kamala Harris does not have that thing, in addition to, the vice president is generally soon to be like the future of the party. I don't think that at this point in time, Kamala Harris wants to stand next to somebody consistently who people are always saying that's the future of the party, that's the future of the party, in addition to all of the political baggage that he has. It makes perfect sense that it would be Tim Walz, because Tim Walz is not going to come with the potential that people are going to every single day be, calling him Genocide Tim, like he's not going to come with that. But also, how can you hate on a nice, friendly, affable 60-year-old man from Minnesota who was a teacher for 20 something years and married a teacher? How can you hate? You can't. But also, there is zero risk of people looking at Tim Walz next to Kamala Harris and thinking he's the future of the Democratic Party, and she's not. And I will say, the more that I learned about Tim Walz, the more that I like him. When I'm learning about Josh Shapiro, I'm like, oh, that's impressive. But I don't come away from the reporting about Josh Shapiro like, oh, I like this man. Oh, I want him to win. I feel that way about Tim Walz. Let's watch one of his ads.
Schools are microcosms of society, and in many cases, it's your last opportunity to share that socioeconomically, racially, and across the board. I had students come to me who were concerned that there was an uptick in some bullying towards our gay and lesbian students. And this is in the mid-90s. They asked if I would be interested in helping start a gay-straight alliance group. My answer was absolutely. And I recognized my responsibility in that. You have an older, white, straight, married male football coach who's deeply concerned that these students are treated fairly and that there's no bullying. And the idea that my players would be interested in coming to that and learn and to speak, to create a culture in a school that was welcoming, open, and understanding was something Gwen and I always strove for. Much the same way that as the senior enlisted soldier in Congress, when it came time to repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell, my job was to go and convince a dozen or so Republicans that this was the right thing to do. We did that, and I'm very proud of those 15 who joined us. We have transgender troops serving honorably right now, decorated warriors, and they see their commander-in-chief belittle them. Brave Americans who wish to serve this nation should be allowed to do so, should be respected, and certainly should never expect to have an attack on their basic patriotisms or their basic humanity come from the White House. It's our pledge here to make sure that doesn't happen. I certainly didn't serve 24 years to watch a fellow veteran be belittled for doing their job, and I will stand in that breach every day. Lots of people are making promises about a progressive agenda. Peggy Flanagan and I are the only team for governor and lieutenant governor who can actually deliver on those progressive promises. And we can because we've done it in the past.
Okay, so I have listened to him speak. I'm always talking about the Ezra Klein podcast. I like a wonk. I'm sorry. I like somebody who's nerdy and gets into the nuances, the nitty gritty of policy. That is Ezra Klein. He was on the Ezra Klein podcast. I like the way that he expressed himself. It was really clear and earnest, and the way that he turns phrases, he's the reason why we're all talking about how weird the Republicans are. JD Vance is weird. That's weird. That comes from Tim Walz. In addition to that, just like, like y'all are saying Papa. Like, well, Tim Walz is younger than my mom. So, like, he's not my grandpa. But, I mean, well, my mom is somebody's grandma. But, in addition to that, hearing about his biography, okay, what are okay. So, if you want to learn more, I've linked it down below. This really, like, switched it for me. Could Tim Walz go from teaching history to being part of it? That was a fun little profile-ish kind of thing from the Washington Post. The quotes from his former students in that reporting warmed my little freaking heart as a girl who loved school. I still have such fond, deep appreciation and affection for my favorite high school teachers. The impact that he had when he was a teacher. I mean, there's somebody in there who said Tim Walz saved my life. Tim Walz, while he was the football coach, also was the first sponsor of the Gay Straight Alliance. I just love that. It's just good character. Good character. A man who got his degree because he wanted to teach social studies. I love social studies. Like the other thing about Shapiro is, he was a prosecutor. Y'all know how I feel about prosecutors. Tim Walz brings folksy demeanor, liberal record to Harris VP shortlist. That's from the WSJ. And I promise, every time I mention the Wall Street Journal, you don't have to mention that it's conservative or it's owned by Rupert Murdoch. I understand. I intentionally read across the spectrum. We read across the spectrum. I understand. One Word has elevated Minnesota's governor to the Democrats' VP wish list. That's from the New York Times. That was really good. Another good article about his record. Once backed by the NRA, Tim Walz now champions tighter gun controls. That's for the Times as well. The other thing that I really like about Tim Walz is that he got elected and he started making moves. This is a man who knows how to speak to all different kinds of people, but he got elected and he didn't govern as a wimp. He didn't govern as a feckless, spineless centrist. He became Minnesota governor and he said, hey, gun rights? No. Kids are getting shot up in their schools. We need gun control. He said, no, we need to protect gay rights and trans rights. We need to protect abortion. And there was one quote in there, I think that this was in the Wall Street Journal. They quoted him as saying, when you get elected, it's your responsibility to use your political capital. You're not saving your political capital for a rainy day. People elect you to do things. And so I'm going to do things. I love that, Tim. I love that. Okay. So this is from the New York Times. Democrats enshrined a right to abortion under state law, legalized recreational marijuana, funded free meals at schools across the state, required employers to offer paid medical and family leave, expanded background checks for gun purchases, and established a goal to transition to carbon-free electricity grid by 2040. Mr. Walz presided over the state's most productive legislative session in decades. I love that. There's always more that you could ask for, but that's very impressive. Also advocated for voting rights for formerly incarcerated people, driver's licenses for undocumented people. It's not bad. It's not bad. It's not bad at all. So, shout out to Uncle Tim. Is that what we're going to call him? Uncle Tim. I think it's a good, safe choice. We don't have to be yelling at each other on the internet over Gaza because it's going to be some more yelling. It's going to be some more yelling because Israel and Iran, it's going to be some more yelling. It's good that Shapiro is not in the mix of that. I have read so much negative reporting about Josh Shapiro today. It makes me think there's no way it's going to be Josh Shapiro. And I've read so much positive reporting done in the last couple of days about Tim Walz. It makes me think there's a reason for that. There's got to be a reason for that. And by the way, just like a random little tidbit, Eric Holder, former Attorney General Eric Holder, his law firm has done all of the vetting for the VP candidates. Fascinating. That's what I'm saying. Like, Obama world is so small. Those Obama people, they're like thick as motherfucking thieves. And Kamala Harris has brought on not only David Plouffe from Obama world, but 3 or 4 other key Obama campaign staffers to Harris for president. Those people, they stay connected. So I really don't think it is going to be Shapiro. Oh, the other reason why I don't think it's Shapiro is because I think, in addition to Shapiro just generally not being vice presidential material, I also think there are enough people who are like, no, we need to save him. You know what I mean? Like, this is just not the right time for Josh Shapiro. I think there are people deeply invested in clearing the path for Josh Shapiro to have a legitimate chance at winning the presidency. I just am not convinced that they would want him to do this. And the Gaza stuff and the super crazy racist Zionist essay from undergrad. It's just too much.